So someone asked, what if we don't want a text description of the hidden object? What if instead we have a silhouette? So that'd be pretty simple. Rather than having a mesh renderer and a text mesh, you'd have a sprite renderer with the corresponding image. So this says gem, so you use the gem image. And one of the attributes of the sprite renderer is there's a color section. You can just click on the color section and choose a really dark color like black or gray, or maybe you want it to be a dark blue or something. And that's it. Functionally, there's not a whole lot of code you'd have to change. I believe just for the ball command, there's a reference to text mesh, so the counter would still have to be a text mesh. Other than that, everything else would it's just replacing text mesh and mesh renderer with the sprite. So let's do something a little bit more complicated than that. What if when you point at the text, you get a pop-up with a silhouette? So let's do that. We're going to reuse our pause menu image. We're just going to shrink it. So we're going to make it 0.3x and 0.4y. Let's move this over. We're going to copy and paste. We're going to call the first one just pop-up win. And the second one we'll call shadow. So you're going to have a window. Let's make this at 6. I think that should be on top of everything else. And we'll make the shadow a child. That way when the window moves, so will the shadow. And we'll make that 7, so that way it's on top of the window. And what we're going to do is we want to be able to change the shadow based on the text you're pointing at. So basically what's going to have to happen is the shadow object is going to have all the hidden object images attached to it as sprite variables, and then you just cycle through them based on which text you're pointing at. So right now there are no scripts attached to the text objects. So you can see it's just transform, mesh, and text mesh. So let's go ahead and add a new script. So right click, create C#, and we'll call this pop-up control. And it's going to be applied to all the text objects. Now, like I said, we're going to exclude the ball because that one is a little bit different. That one you still need the text mesh. So for now we'll just do those 4, and we will put the script onto those 4. Next, what we want to do is we want to open that new script. And we want it to be aware of the pop-up window and the shadow. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse this. I'm going to take the shadow and have the shadow actually be the parent. That way we don't have to make changes to the shadow rather than the pop-up window. Make things a little bit easier. So, pop-up control. So, public transform, capital T, pop up obj. We'll save it. And now these text objects will be aware of pop-up object. So we'll just drag and drop it there. Now, outside of start, outside of update, what we want is void on mouse down. This is a predefined routine, so you need to make sure you don't misspell it and that it's case sensitive, so capital O-M-O. So on mouse over, and what we're going to do is we're going to move the pop-up object. get component, transform, and it's going to be position, and the position needs to be where the text is located, although I think most of the text has like a hot spot to the left rather than the center. So let's see where the windows pop up. New vector 2, and it will be transform dot position dot x transform dot position dot y. So what I'm doing is I could just say position is equal to transform dot position. Transform dot position has both of these coordinates already embedded in it, but I'm actually breaking it out into its two coordinates because I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to move this x. So now what should happen is if I point at any of these four that have the script attached to it, the window should now move. These are not clickable, so that's why. So let's go ahead and add physics 2-day box collider is trigger. There we go. So actually that's located exactly where I want. I wonder if maybe we would want it to actually be above it. So like I said, that's why I broke this out, but rather than changing the x, we're going to change to y. So let's do plus 0.5f. So we'll do a full plus 1. And now, when the mouse moves, we want it to go away. So on mouse exit, we just want it to go to a standard position. U vector 2, like -9, which is off to the left. And it really doesn't matter the y, because it won't be on the screen. There we go. Actually, it is a little bit on the screen still. Scythe seems to give us a bit of a delay. I think it's because there's a collider box on the scythe behind it. I've seen that happen before when you have overlapping collider boxes. It creates issue. Yeah, we can see that's actually covering it. So that should clear up that issue. Yep. Okay. Getting close to being done already, actually, so we'll just make that -10. So now we just need to change the image of shadow. So what we're going to do is we're going to transfer an image from the text to the shadow object. So the way that works, public Sprite, because we're not referring to an object, we're going to refer to the actual image in the asset area at the bottom. So public Sprite, and let's call it gem SPR. We'll just do one so you get the sense of how this is going to work. So shadow, excuse me, not shadow, the text objects are going to actually store that. So gem SPR, gem SPR. Okay. And now what we do is we now have to summon that. So we've moved the object. So again, we're in pop-up control. So pop-up object dot get component, and this time it's sprite renderer dot color, I wonder, equals new color, and it'd be 0, 0, 0 because all the colors taken out of it. So 0% because this ranges from 0 to 1. But before we do that, let's mark that out and see if what I said earlier applies to this method. Because what I said was that if you click on color, you'll change. So in Sprite Render, you click on color and you make this like a black or a dark gray. Now, if that applies to all the sprites, that it doesn't reset it, then actually we might not even need that line of code. So I'm going to try doing it here manually, and if it doesn't work, then we'll do it through the code here. So, alright, that's just changing the color. So what we want to do is we also want to change the actual image. So get component sprite renderer dot sprite equals gem sprite. Now, the way this is written, if the mouse is over any of the text objects, you'll show the gem sprite. So clearly this isn't what the final version is going to be. This is just getting the basic functionality. Yep, we actually don't need that line of code. So wipe, let's stop this. Let's wipe this out. But the problem is the sprite is really too small. And the reason for that is because the window is scaled, and so it keeps the scale. But actually in some ways that works too, because you don't want the image to be too big. Alright, so is what I did is I scaled both the pop-up window and the shadow. We really don't need to have the shadow scaled, so let's change that back to 1, 1. So it looks wrong to begin with. Okay, so when I scaled the shadow, it cascaded to the child. But the opposite should not be true. There we go, that's got it. Okay, almost done. So now we just have to do the other one. So public sprite. What else do we do here? Spaceship. So we'll do ship SPR. Save it. And for the go back to the 4 objects, and so they have that new sprite variable, and so we'll use the spaceship. And now this is where we have to check. So I'm just copying this for a moment because I'm going to be lazy, but then I'll put in the if statements. So this script is attached to the text objects. Okay. If so we always want the window to be moved. If the name of the object is, or should I say, depending on the name of the object, then depends on which sprite we want to appear. So if game object dot name equals obj1txt. So if the object that the mouse is pointing over is object text1, then we want it to be the sprite. Well, excuse me, we want it to be the gem sprite. If, however, I have an extra 1, 2. No, that's fine because that's for that one. Okay, so if it's object to text, then we want it to be the ship sprite. Then we're basically done. Now it's just a matter of scaling this out for all the text objects, and then scaling that out also for the text objects. So if you want me to, I can do them all, but I think it's pretty clear now. Because what you're doing is you're creating a sprite, a shadow sprite for each text object. And when you point over it, it changes the sprite to that corresponding image. So there's the gem, there's the spaceship, and that's going to be the scythe and potion, so we'll do one more. So public sprite potion SPR object text 3 potion SPR, save it. All of them are already highlighted. Drag and drop the potion SPR to the new sprite. Gem, spaceship, nope, scythe, sorry, wrong one. Text object 4. So sorry, this one was a little bit rushed. I kind of just did it off the cuff because of a request that came through. But you can see that we're pretty close to being there, because the reason why this one's wrong is we simply haven't coded for object 3 and the corresponding sprite. So actually you might as well just do that and then we'll be done. So public sprite scythe SPR and we need to drag and drop the scythe. So gem, spaceship, scythe, potion. So there you go. You now get a pop-up hint for the individual texts, and that should about do it. So if you have any other questions, just let me know.